Hello aspirants. In today's lecture we will be covering Africa. After covering Australia, Oceania, today we are revising Africa, and with it we'll be learning a lot of things about geography as whole, which will be very useful for UPSC prelims. So let's begin. Africa. So you see, first things first, look at this map of Africa, and you are seeing Tropic of Cancer, Equator and Tropic of Capricorn. All three are just cutting across Africa. Now, this is the only continent where all the three lines pass through it, including the prime meridian. If you think about it, prime meridian is also passing through here. So, this is a continent that is covering all the four major lines except the international date line that is in the other side of the continent. But the four major lines are passing through Africa. Now, this makes Africa in a very unique position because when we learn the biogeographic regions, we always learn from the equator. What do we learn? We learn that, okay, here is this circle, the earth, there is equator, then we have equatorial region, then we have the grasslands over here, then we have deserts, then you have Mediterranean, China type of climate, British and Laurentian type of climate, taiga, tundra, etc., polar. Africa is a continent that lets you see this almost in a real life scenario. I'll show you how. This is what I'm talking about. Look on the right side and look here. Okay, so these three lines cutting across. So what do we have? We have the equator here. Equatorial type of climate will be present 5 degrees north and south of the equator. That's what we have here. Equatorial type of climate is present here, extremely green, dense, just like the Amazon. Now, these savannas, the grasslands. Savannas are the grasslands. If you have seen National Geographic, Animal Planet, and when they show a lot of animals hunting or anything regarding wildlife and Africa, this is the region they focus on. These are the grasslands. So even grasslands are present over here and here. Yes, they enter here as well, but those are other geographic factors which you do not need to know. One of the famous grassland centric wildlife sanctuaries are Masai Mara and Serengeti. They are present around Lake Victoria. It's the same one and the same national park, it's just called by different names by different countries. Beyond savannas, what do we have? We have deserts. So there is a transition zone and then we enter desert here. Same over here, we're entering desert here, Kalahari and the Namib. Over there we have the Nubian desert and the Sahara desert. So this is what I'm saying. Africa is giving you something to understand biogeographic regions of the earth. So if you ever gets confused about how to study and biogeographic regions and you're not able to understand, you refer to Africa. It covers most, and of course it does not cover all because polar regions are all missed out, but it will give you a very good general idea. So latitude creates belts and margins modify them. So you see what you had seen here? You had seen here that the grassland is entering the equatorial region. Then over here we have another equatorial region present. Those are the Ethiopian highlands. So why is that? That's mostly because whatever we have studied in biogeographic regions, it does not represent in the real life as it is. It changes. So there are winds flowing there, then somebody punches a hole and water starts getting in, then tectonic plates are working, it is splitting Africa in half, many different things are going on. So do not always think that it will be just exact, and so latitudes create belts and margins of the continents modify them. Africa does not have 4 types of climates. What are they? British, Laurentian, tundra and polar. So if UPSC asks you this about Africa, is that what type of climate is not present in Africa, then these type of climates are not found in Africa. That is the British, Laurentian, tundra and polar type. All other types of climates. What do we have? Now this is a revision class. So you should be able to recall all the biogeographic climates at the tip of your fingers. Okay, let us recall. What are present? We have the equatorial. We also have the savannas and the grasslands. We have the desert type of climate. Now, desert type of climate are two. One is the tropical, there is the hot deserts, and one is the temperate, that is the cold deserts. After this, we have the Mediterranean, also present in Africa, the China type of climate or the Natal type of climate. The city of Natal is in South Africa, and in entire continent of Africa, that is the only place that has the China type of climate, nothing else. And finally, we have, and then we go to the British, Laurentian, Tundra and Polar. So, if you are serious about prelims 2026, these should be memorized. If, okay, I can understand that you do not know what they actually show, where rainfall happens, where it does not happen, understood. You might not know it, you need more revision. It is January 20, you have a lot of time to revise. But you should at least know what are the different biogeographic regions, which UPSC can always ask you. Now, let's go to the tectonic plates and let's get into Africa. What is forming Africa? Why is Africa the way it is? Why not any other way? First things first, compare this to Australia. What did we learn in Australia? We had learned that Australia, if this is Australia, these are the tectonic plate of Australia. Australia is extremely stable. That's what we had learned. And what important hint did it give about Australia? It told us that Australia is extremely dry because it does not have any highlands. Highlands are not present in Australia. Okay, very few highlands are present and it is very small to create any sort of rainfall. So, okay, we understood that it is a dry continent because of its tectonic plates. Africa is also in the same belt. African belt is a very stable belt. Things are happening around Africa, not within Africa. Just one important thing is happening within Africa, but we will test it later. However, there is no constructive plate margin in the entirety of Africa. This tells us that African plate is also an extremely stable plate, but it is not as dry. Number one, because it is a huge continent. It cannot be compared to just one land of Australia. It is massive. So of course there are different kinds of weather patterns that are going on in Australia. In Africa. It is dominated by shields and cratons. What are shields and cratons? I know we haven't studied much of shields and cratons and it is not present in our books as well, but I think it is extremely important for a serious student of geography to know what is shields and cratons. Now look at this map. The red portion is Archean cratons. You just need to know cratons. You don't have to learn. Red means deep pink means these regions are those regions that are extremely old. In fact, the oldest. The oldest. They are extremely stable rock formations. A rock is formed, it remains there for billions of years. I think for 2-3 billion years is the age of these dark pink things which you see here. Now, over the period of time, they become so stiff, so hard, and so embedded in their place that it becomes extremely hard for them to move. Even the tectonic plates that is going around them, they have to go around them, and they find it extremely hard to move them. So things start happening around these. So if there is this shield here, for example, and for some reason it comes across a continent-continent collision. Something happened and things eroded, fold mountains formed, and now the turn has come for this shield. So what will happen is that first features will form around this shield. Young fold mountains will become around this shield, and then it will start pushing the shield up. Of course, tectonic plate forces are one of the most powerful forces on the earth, and these rocks will not be able to stop it, but they stop it the most. And after this comes the brown ones, the orange one. This is a proterozoic shields. These are younger, but still it is extremely strong and powerful. The green one is the one that is currently happening, extremely malleable to change. That's why we have the Himalayas here. I mean, earthquakes at the drop of a hat. Anything happens, there's an earthquake. So those are extremely weak, malleable, can be turned, can be folded, can be wrapped up, can be different sorts of things. But the pink ones and the orange ones, these are the hardest. Understood? Now look at Africa. Entire continent of Africa is pink and orange. Extremely hard to move around. That's why Africa is full of plateaus, because even if the tectonic plates try to do some damage, they have to go around, and then they can have the power to push inside or do some damage inside. So, extremely powerful shield is the African shield. What are cratons? Now, I'm just giving you an overview of cratons. You can always look it up. So, cratons are, as I have told you, extremely old piece of rock. Extremely old piece of rock that is just sitting there, embedded there, and does not move. Over the period of time, it just gets hardened, 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 and over the period of time, of course, it becomes extremely hard for it to move. So, shield is the part of the craton that peeks out. Now, over the period of time, what happens in this layer of rock is that different soil particles and rock particles keep on forming a layer on top. Something happens, the layers remove, and the shield peaks up. When that peaks up, the craton peaks up, showing us the shield. And the platform is, of course, the platform where it is embedded. Together, the shield and the platform are called the craton. This is the reason why Africa has huge number of waterfalls and large waterfalls like the Victoria Falls. Victoria Falls are the largest falls, the longest falls on the planet Earth. This is the reason why, because those Africa is a plateau continent. Rivers that are flowing, they are flowing on top of the plateaus, and around the coasts they just drop down. So when they drop down, they form these huge waterfalls. It is elevated. So rivers, tectonically stable and uplifted, with poor navigation near river mouths. So Congo or Zambezi flow across plateaus and then suddenly plunge as waterfalls near the coast. So that's why they have huge waterfalls. But something different is happening in Africa, like I had explained. Now, one thing which these rocks cannot, these rocks always break apart is in front of divergent forces, a part of the tectonic forces. Now, we know that tectonics are, one is the collision, one is the divergent forces. So, explained that a lot in the Australia class. So, collision is, of course, of three types: ocean, ocean, ocean continent, and continent, continent. None of them work in front of a craton, but only to limited force. After a point of, after a line, there is a breaking point and then it breaks apart. Okay, but divergent forces is something that works wonderfully. Now, when a craton is sitting here, divergent forces push from here, and when there is an internal problem going on, it just pushes up and divides the craton into two parts. That is exactly what is going on in Africa. You see, there is an East African Rift Valley. So this is the Rift Valley going on here. Now, what is a Rift Valley? This Rift Valley is forms when there are divergent forces active in a tectonic plate. When two plates are pulling apart, they are getting away from each other. Then magma from the within moves up, creates volcanoes, creates lakes. Second part, they are again splitting up, splitting up, splitting up. Now they will make way for more deeper lakes and the ocean, called the nascent sea or the current Red Sea. And finally, both the plates are finally far away and a huge ocean is formed. Okay, so that is what is happening in Africa. two things are formed in divergent plate boundary. Number one, volcanoes, and number two is some amount of lakes and seas and eventually oceans. One UPSC question can always ask you is that a volcano is present and it is surrounded by plateaus. Another volcano is surrounded by young fold mountains. You have to identify which one is from divergent forces of action and which one is from convergent forces of action. Always remember that in divergent forces of action, the volcanoes will be surrounded by plateaus, not mountain chains. While in the constructive plate boundaries, there will always be a volcanic chain that is going on there. So, divergent plate, you see now one branch is going over here, another branch is over here, and as I had said, Red Sea is forming, it is splitting Africa into two parts. Similarly, over here, now to look at the lakes, there is a series of lakes here which we'll be covering soon, but Lake Victoria is not a part of it. Lake Victoria has a different story altogether. There are different lakes that are here which we'll be covering now, but Lake Victoria is not a part, and divergent plate boundary is working in East Africa. That is how divergent plate boundary forms. Now this is a continental crust. So this crust can be a craton as well. The divergent plate will still be forming. Rift Valley. So most of Africa is in this stage. Once the magma moves up, the continental crust starts moving away from the magma. So divergent plate boundary has started acting here. Next is the magma moves up and a small level of lakes or a nascent sea or a very young sea is getting formed. And finally, a huge ocean. That is what is expected eventually in future after millions of years, that this is how Africa will look like. And this piece is Lake Victoria. All the other lakes have disappeared. They were all formed one. Now, we are looking at two different kinds of rift valleys here. One is the West African Rift Valley and another is the East African Rift Valley. Now, both of them are eventually going to form together, but the result is the same. It's going to split Africa into two parts. What I want to show you is that this is different volcanoes that are present and also lakes. So these are the lakes that are present. The one way to remember them is take TM. These are only the list of important lakes, that is Lake Turkana, Albert, Edward, Kivu, Tanganyika and Malawi. Take TM. So we're starting with Lake Turkana that is present here. None of the lakes are within one country. All of them are shared. Lake Turkana. Then we have Lake Albert, Lake Edward, Lake Kivu, Lake Tanganyika, and finally Lake Malawi. All of these lakes are extremely deep lakes because of course they are a part of a rift valley. Magma is forcing them up and splitting this continent in half. Of course, these are going to be extremely deep lakes, and these are also arranged in north-south order. Now, what did we learn in tectonic plates? These are few young fold mountains in Africa because it is mostly a plateau continent and the cratons play a huge role in the current geography of Africa. Mostly plateaus are due to cratons. Eastern side has volcanoes like Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya. Why? Divergent plate boundary. Let me show you those volcanoes. Here, there is Nyiragongo volcano over here, Kilimanjaro volcano over here, then a few volcanoes over here, completely within the African rift system. You see, when such things happen, there are volcanoes forming, there are lakes forming. I mean, the hints are enough for anyone to understand what is going on there. Famous lakes form a line, rivers flow smoothly. Now, this is one case. You see, UPSC is getting questions which are becoming analytical in nature, even in maps. So, remember, if a question comes that rivers are fine when they're flowing, but when they're near the coast, they fall down. That is an African river which they're talking about. To compare, look at Indian rivers. Where do we have most of our waterfalls? We have close to the mountains. Once they are leaving the they are leaving the Himalayas, they're going, rapids are forming, waterfalls are forming, and then they go into the ocean. But African rivers are different. Waterfalls, rapids are closer to the coast. Why? Because most of the time, these rivers are in a plateau. They're flowing in a plateau and then they fall down close to the coast when the plateau ends. So Africa is a land of plateau. Welcome back to this diagram. I hope while revising geography, all of you are practicing this diagram. It is extremely important for you to understand. Whenever any question comes and you are getting confused, draw this and try and make a logical sense out of it. You will be there. Believe me, you will be there. Look at Africa. Pause the video here and think where Africa would be. So, where will Africa be? We know that Africa does not have British or original type of climate. Okay, so we know that the northern end of Africa will be somewhere here. Southern end will also be somewhere here. So Africa will be lying around these. So subtropical high, equatorial low, subtropical high is forming. That means deserts form a very important part of the African continent. That means the middle part of Africa has very dense forests and has very dense forests, and also grasslands are also there and savannas are also there, and there has to be clear transition going on. Also, there has to be some amount of rainfall in the eastern part because the western part is taking away the rains. Okay, so with this information now, let us begin with the deserts. Now, core rule, deserts, remember please, these are not deserts which we study in geography. This is what we study in geography. Core rule is deserts form where descending air and lack of moisture coincide. Where Hadley cell, again, welcome back to Hadley cell. Hadley cell is falling here, Hadley cell is falling here. So we have our deserts forming in these regions, subtropical high. Cold currents intensify dryness on western margins, and we will see how the Sahel region of Africa is one of those regions where the cold currents intensify the dryness. We will study it soon. Now this is the Sahara desert. Now one reason, the most important reason why Sahara is formed is because of the Canary current. Number one. Number two, it is extremely inside the continent. Africa, we had studied, is it is widest at the equator. Widest at the equator. It means that the region that is close to the equator will be far away from the coast. Once it is far away from the coast, of course, there will be extremely less amount of rains. So it is of course in a high pressure belt, Hadley cell is falling, so rains will not happen. Secondly, it has a large continental interior. It is far away from the coast, resulting in further dryness. There are a few mountain barriers, almost none. And finally, this Canary current. Because of this current, there will always be an intensified high pressure over the Sahara desert. Now we are coming to the Sahel region, as I had explained to you. Now, there are two dominant climate systems over here. One is Sahara, the second is savanna, grasslands to the south. So, as I had said, that there has to be a transition that is going on. So, once we come down from desert towards the equator, we cannot go directly to the equator. There will be a branch. That is, from Sahara, we branch down to the Sahel region. So, what is the Sahel region? Sahel region is something that cannot be called a pure desert. something that cannot be called a grassland or any other type of climate. Sahel region is a transition. You'll find both the factors of a desert as well as some other climate like grasslands will be present there. What do we have here? So ITCZ moves north and creates monsoon rains. So once it is in the north, sometimes there is rains happening over here, sometimes there are no rains happening. It is extremely variable. But the point to be noted is in Sahara, there are no rains happening or extremely less rains that are happening in Sahara. But in Sahel region, sometimes some rains happen. That's why there are some amount of plantations that are present in the Sahel region. Now, the Namib Desert. Now we go beyond the equator, we go below. So the Sahara Desert was formed because of the Canary Current. The Namib Desert is because of the Benguela Current. It is also in the same latitude as the Sahara, north, the same south, 20 to 30 degrees, around 30 degrees, 30 35 degrees also. The Namib Desert is present. What intensifies it? Benguela Current. Now, because of the Benguela current, there is always an intensified high pressure region present in this. So, even if it is close to the coast, there are no rains forming over here. But being close to the coast has its own benefits. Like it is also called a very foggy desert. Many days of the year, there is in the early mornings, there is temperature inversion and there is a layer of fog present, which of course withers away over time, but there is a layer of fog present. That means there is some amount of moisture that is present, much more than Sahara. Kalahari. Kalahari is on the same latitude as the Namib Desert. Now, what Kalahari does is, it is an interior desert. Now, one thing, yes, Benguela current is flowing here, so there is a kind of disturbance already present, which is not allowing any rains to access this region. But also, there is, because of the interiority, there are no rains reaching this region. Because there are no rains reaching this region, that's why this becomes a desert, but there is some amount of rainfall, some amount of more grass and wildlife present here. So Kalahari Desert, and none of these deserts are cold deserts. All of them are hot deserts. All African deserts are hot deserts. All of them are hot deserts. Now, whatever I have explained to you, pause the video here. Identify which one is what. I think it will be easy for you to identify which one is the Sahara. Of course, this is the Sahara. What was the Sahel? Sahel region is a transition zone, not completely desert, not completely grassland or equatorial region or any other type of region. This is Sahel. Then a foggy desert, that early mornings you will find a fog, temperature inversion, but it will wither away. This is the Namib Desert. And finally, a desert which has rainfalls as well sometimes and sustains a good amount of wildlife. Not a good amount, but better. This is the Kalahari. And that's it, guys, for this part. Thank you.